we did some tests of would it be possible for David in close shots for me to put, it's a bit like the old whose line is it anyway, game of David's arms would be my arms, and so Scott could have my head in frame and pan down to the hands, and it would be David playing the Volstein Sonata or whatever it was going to be. And then we played around with that, and we thought that's not too bad. But I thought, with my then limited understanding of film, I said, wouldn't it be great? I feel pretty certain, because I'd seen a lot of piano films over the years. I remember as a child, the Eddie Duchin story with Tyrone Power was something I probably saw with my mum when I was about 7. And I just remember how emotional that film was. Looking back on it, I've never seen it since. It's probably a little bit Hollywood, a bit syrupy and a bit sentimental. But there was something about connecting with the emotion of the piano. And I remember there were quite wide shots. And I don't know how much Tyrone Power played or whether he was miming. But when I look back, I do remember that you had a lot of shots where you didn't actually see his hands. You saw him over the keyboard. Or there might have been a cutaway to a hand double or whatever. And I thought, if we can get some hero shots where, my head and my shoulder and my elbow and my hands and the keyboard are all in there together. I was assigned this really brilliant piano tutor called Ricky Edwards, and we just worked together. I'd go to his place in Melbourne and do a couple of 2 or 3 hour lessons 2 or 3 times a week for about 4 months. It was nailing Scott down to what are the pieces you're going to finally use in my scenes as the older David. That took a bit of pressure from me to say, well, if it's going to be the Flight of the Bumblebee, great. And I said, I can, because it was all mimed to playback, but I learnt it percussively, and Ricky and I had this elaborate system of going, wow, in that Liszt Hungarian Rhapsody No. 2, he said, you're great, you've got the rhythm of the chords, and then I'd, bar 48 to bar 67, too hard, that's going to be the red shot. The red shots were the ones where you go, you can't come anywhere near me because it's just, or you can do me in close-up or whatever, but I can't play it. But the white shots, which were the hero shots, were the bits where he said, you're doing this and it looks like you are absolutely playing it, I'd played piano from about the age of 9 till about the age of 15. So I knew my way around the keyboard, and when I was working with Ricky, I had to sort of, once the notes left the stave, I remember I'd have to count up and go, is that a B flat? Right, and I'd mark the score, because sometimes I thought if the camera's going to be down that end of the piano, I want to make sure that I hit that B flat, because that's the authentic moment. The bit in the middle, Flight of the Bumblebee, is pretty fast and dazzling, and I got the fingering right, but the racket I was making on the piano I was working on at home with a pillow stuffed in it was pretty shocking. But with David's pre-record, it all kind of knitted together. And the greatest payoff I got from that was at the post-Oscar party. Elton John has an annual AIDS awareness fundraiser party, and I got invited to that. And he came up to me and he congratulated me and said, your piano playing was fantastic and just thrilling. And he kept going on and on and on. And I didn't have the heart to tell him that it wasn't actually me playing. So I was thrilled that whatever techniques we created to achieve that, that it was truthful for an audience. There was one element to the screenplay that didn't make it into the final cut. There was another kind of meta narrative going on, which was that the film would start with David and Gillian now in the contemporary period, journeying back to London to meet Cecil Parkes, the John Gielgud role. And we shot all of that so that there would be little echoes of, on our journey back, you'd flash back to teenage David when he first went to the Royal College of Music, and they'd sit side by side with me going to meet John Gielgud's character, and that would be the memory trigger. But I think they made the decision, which was probably a very smart one, that would make the time frames and the boxes within boxes of the historical linear storyline so complicated to follow. So they eliminated all that. The only sadness for me was that I actually did get to shoot a scene with Gielgud where I play for him, and that was presumably going to be the end of the story. I've never seen that final scene because it was just one of the most extraordinary days of my life to think, what is going on? I'm shooting a scene with Sir John Gielgud, you know. And I remember walking in when we were shooting at the Royal College of Music, and Scott said, "Come on up," because he was filming a scene with Noah. He said, "Come on up and meet Sir John." I went, right. And I went in, and Jeffrey Simpson had this huge external light coming through the skylight of the Royal College of Music to give us the source of sunlight and everything. And it was a lunch break, and Gielgud was sitting there in a sort of mustard cardigan, this was his costume, and some, you know, sort of Grosby hush puppies or whatever, and some simple slacks. And I remember he was sitting eating a cheese sandwich, and he was running some lines, and I just remember his voice being running through his lines, and I thought, if there's a definition of God, this is the image, because he was sort of bathed in this sunlight.